Welcome back to Things You Don't Know. I am Dr. William Weaver here with my most esteemed colleague, Dr. Sean Deneen. And today we're diving into one of the strangest and most secretive ruling families in modern history, the Kim dynasty of North Korea.
It certainly is, Dr. Weaver. The story of Kim Jong-un and his three-generation of ruling family is more than just odd propaganda. It's a tale of myths, power, and how one dynasty has shaped global politics for three generations. And interestingly, it's also about how a tightly controlled society strains under the very human desire for comfort, technology, and a better life.
Okay. Let's start with the quote, magical powers, unquote. State propaganda presents the Kim family as almost divine. Kim Il sung was said to perform superhuman feats against the Japanese, single handedly defeating battalions with his guerrilla resistance.
It gets even crazier with his son, Kim Jong il. He supposedly shot 11 holes in one his very first time on a golf course when he was 8 years old. The state media claimed he could control the weather with his moods. His birth, which really took place in a Russian army hospital, was said to bring double rainbows over Mount Pektu, the sacred mountain of the Korean people.
Yeah, and then Kim Jong un inherited this mantle. We hear stories of him being a genius strategist at age 3, driving cars before most kids can ride a bike, and even not needing to use the bathroom at all. It sounds laughable from the outside, but in North Korea it is treated with deadly seriousness.
And that's the point. These myths aren't casual stories, they're scripture. They transform the leader into something beyond politics, a sacred figure chosen by destiny. To question him even in your mind is heresy, not dissent. And that sacralization allows the regime to demand obedience in ways few modern states, even dictatorships, can.
Yes, it does really raise authoritarianism and dictatorship to new heights, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
But here's the tension. As North Koreans increasingly glimpse South Korean dramas, Chinese consumer goods, and even second-hand smartphones, the idea of a supernatural leader grows harder to reconcile with the reality of poor food rations and outdated technology. Let's take a look at the political life and crises of each Kim. Kim Jong un came to power in 2011, still in his 20s. Many thought he'd be swept aside as inexperienced.
And instead, he consolidated power with brutal efficiency. His uncle, Jang Song-thak, was executed publicly at a meeting of the Politburo for not laughing at one of his jokes. His half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, was assassinated in Malaysia with VX nerve agent gas in 2017. No rival was safe.
Is that the one that went to Disneyland or something?
He did. And he went to exile in Malaysia rather than going home, and they murdered him in Kuala Lumpur airport.
Wow. At the same time, he played statesman. The Trump summits in 2018 and 2019 gave him legitimacy. still can't imagine that. I guess they went and had hamburgers at a McDonald's. Is that right, Dr. Deneen?
Indeed, in Hanoi, no less.
Yeah. Two obese people controlling and with authoritarian desires. But this gave him legitimacy because he stood on equal footing with the President of the United States, even if no real denuclearization followed.
And that legitimacy was the prize. For a small, starving, isolated state, global recognition is power.
What's really striking is that every Kim has been tested by a crisis that defined their reign. For Kim Il sung, it was the Korean War, a bloody stalemate that froze the peninsula, and later the Pueblo Crisis of 1968, when his forces captured a U.S. spy ship, the Pueblo. Those moments hardened his reputation as a warrior leader.
Check out our Pueblo podcast and also our History Twist podcast, where that turns into a war. Kim Jong il's ordeal was the famine of the 1990s. With Soviet aid gone and China pulling back, the country starved. Hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, died. The regime responded with myth, miraculous tales of the dear leader breastfeeding infants and other supernatural feats to distract from hunger and desperation.
Kim Jong un's crisis has been twofold. First, the assassination of his brother, a warning that no family bond would override political survival. But perhaps more corrosive is the slow erosion of his image as North Koreans glimpse wealth and modern comforts through smuggled phones and underground communications, etc. The South Korean dramas, cross border trade, all of these things have created some information.
This is really where the cracks show this kind of information can be dangerous. Younger generations see their peers in Seoul with cars, K-pop idol music, good paying jobs, and endless food variety, while they struggle with meager rations and outdated apartments. Even the loyal class, military officers and the secret police, the supposed elite, quietly envy the consumer goods pouring across from the Chinese border.
When you talk about this information leakage being dangerous to Kim Jong Un, uh, no, read the or listen to the podcast we just did about curtailing the freedom of the press and freedom of speech here, and get scared, people. You know, the irony here, the regime has to allow some foreign goods and limited trade to keep its elites happy. But every imported refrigerator, every pirated South Korean DVD, every secondhand Samsung phone is a reminder that life can be better. The mythology of a leader who provides everything begins to feel hollow.
Exactly. And that yearning for a higher standard of living isn't just an economic issue. As we said, it's political dynamite. The mythology collides with the lived experience of people who know there's more out there. But we need to remember that all these myths didn't appear out of thin air. As B.R. Myers says in his book, The Cleanest Race, they borrow heavily from Japan's tradition of emperor worship, since Korea was a Japanese colony for almost 40 years.
Yeah. During colonial rule, Koreans were forced to bow to the emperor's portrait and participate in Shinto rituals. As scholar B.R. Myers put it, the Japanese depicted their race as a pure, childlike people watched over by a fatherly emperor.
And after 1945, with the partition of Korea, Kim Il sung just filled that vacuum. Bradley Martin, in his masterwork Under the Loving Care of the Fatherly Leader, shows how propaganda clothed Kim in the emperor's mystique, ignoring conventional Marxism and transforming a guerrilla fighter into a semi divine patriarch.
Yeah, instead of Shinto gods, the myths focused on Mount Pictu and guerrilla legends. Titles like Son of the Nation and Eternal President sound more like scripture than political office.
And crucially, the relationship between leader and people was paternal, specifically maternal. Here's Myers again. The leader's relationship to his people is not that of a god to his worshippers, but that of a parent to his children. That parental imagery, even seeing male leaders as mother figures, still anchors the propaganda today. Now, Kim Jong il's myths went further into fantasy territory. Songs claimed he could use chuk ipap, earth shrinking magic, to appear anywhere instantly.
Yeah, I guess he was like basically their version of Nightcrawler.
It sounds like something more from a comic book than something political. But Kim Jong un is smart enough to have shifted the narrative. State media even denied that he could teleport. Instead, the focus is on him as a caring father.
Yeah. Look at the 2024 anthem, Friendly Father. It doesn't call him a god, it calls him Dad. And that's intentional. Martin explains each successive Kim must be presented as the same eternal Father, differing only in name and face.
It's a softer mythology, but more practical. At a time when people want food, cars, and air conditioning, a magical superhero feels childlike and absurd. A benevolent father figure, though, that can still command loyalty.
Indeed, myths aside, the danger is very real. North Korea's nuclear program destabilizes East Asia. Japan and South Korea live under constant threat. The U.S. keeps 28,000, more or less, troops on the peninsula as a deterrent.
Now, China plays both sides. They don't want North Korea to collapse. That would mean millions of refugees and loss of their trade deals. But they also don't want nuclear brinkmanship. They have enough trouble with the Uyghurs and the Tibetans. So they prop Kim up while subtly applying pressure when it suits them.
And now Russia, desperate for manpower in Ukraine, has turned to Pyongyang. There are credible reports of North Korean laborers and even conscripts being sent abroad in exchange for fuel, cash, or gold.
The funny thing is, the Ukrainians managed to get some of them to defect by opening a brothel behind the lines. Me-
Yeah, yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Meanwhile, inside North Korea, the contradictions deepen every day. The regime promises greatness, yet more and more citizens dream not of revolutionary glory, but of a washing machine, a smartphone, or leader forbid reliable electricity. That hunger for modern comfort is reshaping the geopolitical stakes because it makes the regime more brittle than its myths can suggest.
And Kim. uses unpredictability as his shield, missile tests, sudden diplomacy, sudden isolation. He cultivates an air of uncertainty. Is it bluff or real threat? That ambiguity is part of his power.
It certainly is, but unpredictability can't refrigerate food to keep the lights on. That gap between myth and material comfort, as we've said, is the slow burning fuse under the Kim dynasty. Now, history, folks, I can say this as a historian, is full of rulers claiming divine powers, pharaohs, emperors, kings who heal by their touch. The Kims are heirs to that tradition.
Yeah, the difference is that those myths are now paired with nuclear weapons. That makes them far more dangerous than any medieval king.
The lesson is clear. You can dismiss the mythology as nonsense if you want, but don't dismiss its power. Millions of North Koreans believe it, if only because they don't want to end up in a prison camp. And yet, in the long run, the desire for freedom, technology, and comfort may be more powerful than any myth.
In the end, the Kim dynasty's greatest threat may not come from Washington, Beijing, or Moscow, but from the quiet dreams of its own people for a better life. So, magical powers, assassinations, nuclear threats. The Kim dynasty is part medieval monarchy, part modern dictatorship. But beneath the myths lies an uneasy truth, the simple human wish for more food, more comfort, more dignity.
Perfectly reasonable wish, Dr. Weaver. And I just want to tell you, we're not done yet, folks. Kim Un's heir is his sister, Kim Jong Sang, and she's even crazier than he is. The rumor is she takes political prisoners out of the internment camps and forces them to cut her toenails and deal with her hirsute face. If they please her, they are released. If they don't, they are dispatched by a bullet in the head. So, a woman in charge of a society like this who has her own emotional problems, that may make things even worse. Heaven help us all. And that makes North Korea not just a geopolitical puzzle, but a deeply human story. Myth and politics sustain the regime for now, but longing for a better life, even the right to make mistakes and live on one's own terms, may one day undo it.
And I would ask our listeners to pay attention to this. It's not just an isolated incidence of a weird people in Southeast Asia. This kind of authoritarian dictatorship seems, in my opinion, to be spreading. I think we see harbingers of it right here. So we better watch out. Let's not allow information to be cut off. Let's not allow ourselves to walk down that same path that's been walked down throughout history. History has parallels, always has, probably always will, but we can be wise and avoid some of the darker pitfalls.
Indeed, you're quite right, Dr. Weaver. We can and we should. We're the heirs of a society, for all its faults, that has been a beacon at its best of freedom to the world. And it would be more tragic for the rest of the world and even for us if we lose it. So you're right. Question things, look at multiple points of view. Don't take the fact that you agree with somebody as a license for them to tell you how to think and live about everything. Make yourself crazy, but figure things out, or at least try to. And give us a like, folks, a comment, Check out this podcast and our sister podcast, History Twists. You'll like it. We we really get a lot out of doing this, and there are more interesting things to come. But we need your help, your viewpoints, your participation. It makes the job infinitely easier.
And your subscriptions too. It doesn't cost you a thing, you know. Anyhow, this has been Things You Don't Know. Goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the myths that we easily dismiss are the things that are holding up empires. So long.